You tap your card on a little box. It beeps, and you're done. No swipe, no signature, no pin, and the money has already moved. It feels a bit like magic, doesn't it? And here's the strange part. That card has no battery. Nothing inside it is plugged in or charged up or holding any power at all. So how does a dead slab of plastic wake up, do actual cryptography, and settle a payment in a fraction of a second with no power of its own? Now, look closely at your card and you'll spot a tiny symbol, usually near one edge, a little set of curved lines like ripples or a sideways wave. Most people assume it's just a logo. It isn't. That symbol is an antenna, a real radio antenna printed right into the plastic. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what happens in that tap, how a batteryless card gets powered straight out of thin air, how it has a lightning-fast secret conversation with the terminal, and why, and this is the part that genuinely surprises people, tapping is actually safer than the old swipe you trusted for decades. Because the big fear is obvious. It's wireless, so can't someone just walk past and quietly steal my money? We'll answer that honestly, with facts. No fear-mongering, but no sugarcoating either. By the end, you'll be a little less worried and a lot more informed. So no hype, no doom, just how it works. So let's open one of these cards up, carefully, in our imagination. You'd think there'd be a lot going on in there. There really isn't. Peel back the plastic and you find just two things. One, a chip, a tiny square of silicon, smaller than a grain of rice. And it's not just a scrap of memory, it's a little tamper-resistant computer, a secure microcontroller. Two, an antenna. Several loops of hair-thin wire running in a coil all the way around the edge of the card, laminated so flat you never feel them. That coil is wired straight to the chip. And that, honestly, is the whole machine. Now, notice what's missing. There is no battery. No little cell, no charge port, nothing to plug in, nothing to top up. And that trips people up, because we've been trained to assume wireless means has power inside it. A phone is wireless and it has a battery. A wireless speaker has a battery. So surely the card has one tucked away too, right? Nope. Your card is completely inert. Sitting in your wallet, it's doing absolutely nothing. A sleeping object with no power source. It can't send a signal, it can't be pinged from across the room, it can't do a single thing on its own. Which raises the obvious question, the little mystery this whole video hangs on. If there's no battery in there, then when you tap, where on earth does the power come from? How does a dead chip suddenly boot up and start doing math? The answer is one of the coolest bits of everyday physics you will ever meet. Let me show you. Here's the trick, and it is genuinely beautiful. That little box you tap, the terminal, isn't sitting there quietly waiting. It is constantly humming. All day long, it broadcasts an invisible electromagnetic field, oscillating back and forth at a very specific frequency, 13.56 megahertz. That field just pours out of a coil inside the reader, into the air around it, whether or not a card is anywhere near. Now watch what happens when you bring your card in. Your card has a coil too, remember? And there's a 200-year-old law of physics, Faraday's law, that says put a loop of wire into a changing magnetic field, and the field pushes a current through the wire. It just does. So the reader's field reaches into your card's coil and induces a little electric current in it. The chip grabs that current, smooths it out from wobbly alternating current into steady power, and that's it. It boots up. The card is alive, powered entirely by the reader across a couple of centimeters of empty air. This is called electromagnetic induction, or inductive coupling, and you already own a gadget that does the exact same thing, a wireless charging pad. One coil broadcasts, a second coil harvests. Your card is basically a tiny wireless charger. It only needs the faintest whisper of power for a fraction of a second, just enough to run one small computation. And here's a lovely bonus. That single field does two jobs at once. It powers the card and it carries the conversation. The reader nudges the field to send data, and the card answers by tugging on how much energy it draws, a flicker the reader can feel. One hum in the air does everything. No battery, no cable, no second channel, just physics. So let's give this technology its proper name. It's called NFC, Near Field Communication. And that name is doing a lot of quiet work, so let me unpack it. Communication, fine, it lets two devices talk. Near field is the important part. It means this only works inside the reader's close-in magnetic field, the near field, which fades away astonishingly fast the moment you move away. NFC grew out of an older, broader family of technology called RFID, radio frequency identification. The same basic idea as the tag that beeps at a shop exit or the fob that unlocks your office door. A couple of companies, Sony and Philips among them, pinned down the core standard back in the early 2000s, and an industry group called the NFC Forum formed around 2004 to keep everyone speaking the same language. Now, here's the key thing to hold on to. The range is tiny. We're talking a few centimeters. In practice, for a real payment, your card has to be within about 4 centimeters of the reader. In theory, maybe 10, but honestly, you almost have to touch it. And your instinct might be that short range is a limitation, some flaw the engineers couldn't fix. Flip that completely around. The short range is a feature. It's one of the main things that makes contactless safe. Because a signal that only reaches a few centimeters is a signal that nobody can grab from across the room. Think about what that means. For anything to talk to your card, it basically has to be pressed right up against it. That whisper quiet, almost touching range isn't a weakness at all. It is the first line of defense, and it is completely deliberate. Okay, your card is in the field, it's powered up, it is wide awake. Now, what does it actually do? It has a conversation, a very fast, very structured conversation with the terminal. And there's a global rule book for exactly how that conversation goes. It's called EMV, and that stands for Europay, MasterCard, and Visa, the three companies that first wrote it, though it's now run by a shared body called EMV Co., and every major card network uses the same thing. And here's a nice detail. It's the exact same chip security you use when you insert a card and it sits in the slot for a second. The same brains, just done wirelessly instead of through the metal contacts. So the conversation is quick and to the point. The terminal and the card introduce themselves, agree on which payment app to use, and swap the details of this purchase. Then the terminal essentially asks the card a question, a challenge, and the card does a tiny cryptographic calculation and fires back an answer. Challenge, response, done. The whole exchange finishes in well under a second, often just a few hundred milliseconds. From your side, it's a single beep and a green light, but underneath, in that blink, a real little negotiation just happened. And here's the question that matters, the one that actually decides whether any of this is safe. When the card answers that challenge, what exactly does it say? Because if it just blurts out your card number for the terminal to hear, then yeah, this whole wireless thing probably should make you nervous. But it doesn't do that. What it says instead is the clever, quiet heart of the entire system. Let me show you.
This is the part that should make you relax. When the terminal challenges your card, the card does not hand over a fixed, reusable secret. It doesn't say, here's my number, here's my code, off you go. Instead, for this one transaction, just this tap right now, it generates a brand new single-use cryptographic code. Engineers call it an application cryptogram, and it's built fresh on the spot from 3 ingredients: a secret key that is buried deep inside the chip and never ever leaves it, a little counter that ticks up by 1 every single time you tap, and the details of this exact purchase. Mix those together and you get a unique code that is good for this transaction and nothing else. The bank checks it, sees it's valid, and approves. Now, here's why that's so powerful. Suppose someone captured that code right out of the air, a perfect copy. It's worthless to them. They can't reuse it for a second purchase because the counter has already moved on, and the next code will be completely different. It's a one-time password for your money, minted fresh on every single tap. Intercept it, and you're holding yesterday's lottery ticket. And this is exactly why tapping is safer than the thing it replaced. Remember the old magnetic stripe? The dark band on the back used to swipe? That stripe held static data, the same numbers every single swipe. Copy it once, and you could clone the card forever. That's what powered the whole counterfeit card era. Contactless quietly killed that entire business model. There's no fixed secret to steal anymore, just a river of one-time codes, each one dead the instant it's used. So here's the plot twist of this whole story. Tapping was never the risky new thing. The swipe was the risky old thing.
Now, if you pay with your phone instead of the plastic card, something even cleverer is happening, and it protects you in a way the card alone can't. When you add a card to a phone wallet, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, they all work the same way underneath. Your real card number is not saved on the phone. Let me say that again because it's genuinely wild. Your phone does not store your actual card number. What happens instead is at setup, the card network swaps your real number for a stand-in, a device-specific token. It looks like a card number, but it's a different number, and it only works on that one phone. Your real number gets sealed away in a little hardened vault on the device, a dedicated secure chip. So now every time you tap, the phone sends that stand-in token, plus a one-time code just like the plastic card does. And here's the beautiful consequence. The shop never sees your real card number. Ever. The cashier doesn't, the reader doesn't, and crucially, the shop's computers don't. So if that shop later gets hacked and its payment records get stolen, the thieves walk away with a pile of tokens that only work on your specific phone. Useless to them anywhere else. And on top of all of that, the tap won't even fire until you personally approve it with your face, your fingerprint, or your passcode. So look at the layer stacking up here. A stand-in number instead of the real one. A one-time code on top, locked inside a hardware vault, released only by your own face or thumb. That's a lot of walls around a very small payment. Your phone genuinely does not know the very thing everyone is afraid of it leaking.
Okay, the big fear, the one that sells RFID blocking wallets. Someone brushes past you on the train with a hidden reader and poof, drains your account straight through your pocket. Let's take it apart, honestly. First, range. Contactless works across just a few centimeters. To read your card, a thief would basically have to press a reader right against your wallet and hold it there, not stroll past you. Awkward, obvious, easy to notice. Second, even if they managed it, remember the one-time code. A captured tap gives them a single-use cryptogram that's already spent. They can't replay it.
Third, there's usually a per-tap limit, a ceiling on how much one tap can spend before the system demands a PIN or your fingerprint. As of mid-2026, that cap varies by country. Roughly £100 in the UK, around €50 across much of Europe, and it works differently again in the US. So treat the exact number as something that moves. But the principle holds everywhere. Past a certain amount, a tap alone won't do it. Now, I promised honesty, so here are the real caveats. I'm not going to tell you it's magic proof. A reader held right up against a plain plastic card can read the card's number and its expiry date. That's true, but that is not enough to drain you. It doesn't include the security code for online shopping, and it can't produce a valid fresh cryptogram, so a thief can't make a real tap with it. Readable is not the same as drainable. There's also one genuinely clever attack researchers have demonstrated called a relay attack. Two devices passing signals in real time to stretch the range between your card and a real terminal. It's real, but it's fiddly, it needs precise timing in a live terminal, and it's nowhere near how everyday fraud actually happens. So, do you need an RFID blocking wallet? Honestly, mostly no. It's not harmful, it just isn't doing much. Because the real fraud risk was never a tap in your pocket. It's phishing and data breaches, someone tricking you or hacking a website to get your number online. Guard your number on the internet. Your wallet on the bus is fine.
Let me clear up one neat little distinction, because it ties the physics and the security together really nicely. Your plastic card and your phone both tap the same reader at the same 13.56 megahertz, but underneath they are two completely different kinds of creature. The plastic card is what's called a passive device. No battery, no power of its own, totally asleep until the reader's field wakes it up and lends it just enough energy to answer. It's a beautifully simple little tag that only ever responds when it's spoken to. Your phone, on the other hand, is an active device. It has its own battery, its own processor, it's a full-blown computer. When you pay with it, it's running something called card emulation. It is deliberately pretending to be a card, playing that role over the same tap. Same field, same frequency, same handshake, but one is a sleeping slip of plastic being lit up from the outside, and the other is a wide-awake computer choosing to act like a card. And because the phone is a real computer, it can layer on that extra security we just talked about. The token, the vault, the fingerprint check. It can also flip around and read NFC tags, like tapping a smart poster or pairing a little gadget. Same technology, just pointed the other way. So, the card is a passive tag that gets powered and answers. The phone is an active computer that powers itself and performs. The same simple tap, but two very different machines humming away behind it. So let's replay that whole tap now that you can actually see inside it. You bring your card near the terminal. The terminal's field reaches in, and using 200-year-old physics, the very same trick as a wireless charger, powers up a chip that has no battery of its own. Wide awake now, the chip and the terminal run a fast, structured handshake. The terminal asks a question, the chip answers, not with a reusable secret, but with a fresh, single-use code that's worthless the moment it's spent. The bank checks it, approves it, and you get your beep. All of that in a fraction of a second out of a slab of plastic with no power source. And it turns out that's not just clever, it's safer than everything that came before it. Look at the whole journey. The magnetic stripe from back in the 1960s carried static data that anyone could clone. Then the chip added real cryptography. Then contactless made it wireless in one time. Then the phone added a stand-in number, sealed in a vault, released by your fingerprint.
every single step made your money a little harder to steal, including, and this is the fun part, the wireless step everybody's so nervous about. And it's become completely normal now. As of 2025, in many markets, well over half of all in-person payments are already contactless. Tap to pay isn't the novelty, it's the default. So that little wave symbol on your card was never magic. It's an antenna sipping power out of the air, guarding a clever one-time secret. And now you know exactly what happens in that tap, which means you also know what to actually worry about. And it isn't the tap. If you enjoyed pulling this apart, subscribe and stick around. Next time, we're taking another everyday piece of technology and cracking it wide open, exactly like this. No hype, no doom, just how it works. See you in the next one.